Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Itza Milani and I'm going to be telling you guys about my traumatic birth story. We're going to start from the beginning. So we're going to start with Tuesday. That was my last day at work. I worked up until I was like 39 weeks technically, because that Friday I was turning 40 weeks. But I pretty much worked till the last minute, and I was gonna work literally until I gave birth or my water broke, even if it was at work. And then Wednesday I had went to the restroom, and when I wiped there was actually blood on the toilet paper, so I knew that was kind of like first signs of labor. Fast forward to Thursday, I started having mild contractions with my boyfriend, and we had dinner. Throughout the dinner I was having contractions, and I was like, oh my gosh, watch this be my last meal. It wasn't. Fast forward to Friday, and my contractions were getting worse, gradually getting worse. I had the yoga bounce ball thingy, and I was bouncing on it. That was the only thing that was helping me. Finally, like, my mucus plug came out. Luckily, I was 40 weeks that day, and I had a doctor's appointment at my doctor's office. The nurse, she takes my blood pressure, and I had super high blood pressure. I don't even remember what it was, but mind you, I was having contractions, so I don't know if the pain that I was going through at that moment had any correlation to why my blood pressure was so high. And then my doctor comes in, and then doctor spoke to me. She's like, you know what, like, we took your blood pressure and it was pretty high. My whole pregnancy I had normal blood pressure. My doctor was like, you know what, your blood pressure is going down, but I just want you to go into labor and delivery just to be on the safe side. It's like, we just don't want you to get preeclampsia. And I went into triage, and the nurse that was assigned to me is like, I'm just gonna run your IV just in case you get admitted. And I looked at her like, I don't plan on having a baby. I was already 40 weeks, so this was Friday, June 3rd, and that was my due date. It ended up doing all this tests, like the urine sample, blood test, cervical checks and stuff, like my blood pressure again. And then they kept coming in and they were like, so why did your doctor send you in today? And I would tell them, oh, because my blood pressure was really high. And they were kind of like confused, because my blood pressure by the time I got to the hospital was normal. It was back to normal. They have to keep you at the triage for at least 4 to 5 hours. Those triage beds are so uncomfortable. So I was in there, I had back pain. My what are they called? My contractions were getting stronger. And obviously they had me monitored. They had the baby's heart rate monitored. And then I believe we switched nurses, and I thought I was like gonna get sent home, but then the doctor came in and she started checking like the computer or whatever, and then she left and no one would tell me anything. A nurse came in and she was like, so your baby's heart rate has a lot of dips. That's all she said. And also, the doctor might want to induce you. And I was like, what? My birth wish was to have a natural birth. I've heard it's less painful, and I just kind of wanted to experience it. Plus, I wanted it to be unmedicated. I was kind of against getting induced, and I was like, if I don't need it, I don't want it. She's like, the doctor will come in here and talk to you, probably gonna want to induce you. How do you feel about that? And I was just kind of like, well, why do I need an induction? And she just said, oh, your baby's heart rate just has a lot of dips. I texted my mom and my boyfriend, and I told them that I'm getting admitted. They're going to induce me. And then the doctor wanted to induce me because the baby's heart rate had a lot of dips, and she said since I was already 40 weeks, she just wanted to play it safe, and she thought it was safer to start an induction. So the doctor came in to talk to me and told me, you know what, your baby's heart rate has a lot of dips. We're gonna induce you. And when the triage nurse was like, oh, how do you feel about getting an induction? I was like, well, sure, okay, if it needs to be done, but I want an epidural because I heard inductions are painful. And she started laughing. She told the nurse that she ended up having to do an ultrasound just to see the position of the baby, make sure that he was head down and everything, which thankfully he was. However, he was sunny side up. his face is supposed to be facing my back and his head was facing my stomach. That was like also a little complication because like I said, they were supposed to be the other way around. My nurse, when I got admitted, she literally, every contraction that I had, she had me get up and do lunges. She had me on my bed on all fours, like doing all these kinds of stretches, and had me doing all these things. And I was having contractions. Every time I had contractions, she's like, do it. And I was like, oh my God, okay. And it was so painful. And the purpose was to have my baby's head or face flip my back. And contractions were on my back and it was so painful. And she said the reason was because of the way he was facing, that had a lot to do with it. And he had to give me like, I don't know how many bags of IV before she can do the Pitocin. Oh, all of this was like around 9 o'clock, like when I got admitted into my room. I honestly don't even know what time she gave me the Pitocin, but I know as soon as she gave me the Pitocin, oh my God, those contractions were something else. They were like contractions on steroid. Like they were so painful. I was literally crying. I was like, I can't do this. And she still had me like on all fours. Like she had me rolling on the ball. Like, oh my God, it was so painful. And she just kept telling me like, focus on your breathing, focus on your breathing. And every time I had a contraction, I would tell my boyfriend like, I can't. And I would like practically cry. Thankfully, I wasn't yelling all crazy. I was just crying and like moaning. And I was not trying to be loud or anything. I was like crying, like, I can't do this, I can't do this. Call her, tell the nurse that I need the epidural and I need it now. And I had to be at least 4 centimeters dilated to get the epidural. So she would come in and she's like, you're not 4 centimeters yet. And then like, it's funny because my boyfriend's always like, we would tell her like, oh, she wants the epidural, and then she would disappear. She'd be like, oh, okay, let me check, and then she like not come back for like hours. And finally I was already like 4 centimeters and she was able to get me the epidural. The anesthesiologist came in. He was a nice guy but very strict, and I was so scared because my nurse scared me, like saying you cannot move, like if you move like he'll just like walk away and not even do the epidural. And I was like, oh my God. And she's like, if you have a contraction while he's doing it, like you just have to like suck it up and like just take the contraction, like try not to move, don't cry, like don't do anything. And I was freaking out because at this point I was having like, my contractions were like constant. But thankfully, and oddly enough, I don't know if I was just so worried that like I didn't even feel the contractions, but I did not have a contraction while I was getting like the epidural. Once I got the epidural, I was just like, ooh, like smooth sailing. Get some rest, you're gonna need it. But I was like in no pain at all. Like she would come in like so often, like trying to switch me positions. She's like, you know, like baby's not liking this position, like let's try to move you. So she had me laying on my side. She put the peanut ball in between my legs and she had my legs elevated. Then she lowered my legs. She moved me to my right side. Like she was coming in really frequently and like switching me positions. She's like, you know what, baby doesn't like this position, and she would switch me. She's like, baby's just having a lot of dips. And I was like, okay. But again, like I still didn't know what these dips were or what they signified. So then after, she's like, you know what, doctor wants to come in, she's gonna break your water to see if we can speed up labor. So doctor comes in, she breaks my water, and I was just like, okay. So then they were like, okay, now we just wait. And then again, like she would come in like very frequently, like baby doesn't like this position, let's try this. Like she just kept saying that, baby doesn't like this position, and she would switch me positions. My nurse actually, the shift change was at 7 a.m. so at 7 she left and another nurse came in, and then she's like, baby has a lot of dips. And I was like, can you tell me what these dips mean? Because I mean, I don't know, everybody keeps saying baby has a lot of dips, but I don't know what that means. And then she's like, oh, so his heart rate keeps dropping, like every time you can have a contraction it drops. And then I was like, oh, okay. I was like, is that like, she's like, that's not really good. She's like, we don't know what's going on or why it's happening. So then that's when I kind of got worried, and then she's like, you know what, she's like, you might end up in a C-section. And I was just kind of like, haha, you're funny. No, that's not gonna happen. And she's like, Mr. Elliot, you're my friend, the troublemaker. She would call him the troublemaker because his heart rate kept dropping. He had a lot of dips, so she would move into position too. And she's like, you know what, I think you're gonna have to have a C-section. She came in, she's like, the doctor's gonna come and talk to you. She was a very nice doctor. I had never met her. Like, there's a bunch of doctors that work there, but I had never met that particular doctor. And she told me, she's like, hold on, my baby's crying. Okay, I'm back. If you see the little hand, he's currently eating and he's pulling on my necklace. The doctor comes in and she's like, you know what, your baby's heart rate keeps dropping. We don't know what's happening and you are not dilating fast enough. You're gonna need a C-section. Gets up, she's like, so we're gonna prepare you for a C-section. And I just start bursting in tears. I didn't want a C-section. This was my first baby, so I wanted to experience a natural birth. And it's like, everything's gonna be okay, you're gonna be fine. So then my doctor leaves and I was just like, well, this is not what I wanted, you know?